Well, we are back for another season of Upper Left Sports, and I'll tell you what, Steve, it feels very good to be back watching and talking about Gonzaga basketball.
Absolutely, Drew. I'm excited for this season, man. Obviously, we know the players coming in. We know the rankings. It's going to be another fun season and can't wait for it to get started.
Yeah, you talk about the rankings. It's the second year in the row the Zags enter as a preseason number one in the country. Obviously, the last time we saw this team, we were in Indianapolis watching them lose to Baylor in the national championship game.
Unfortunate.
Time to turn the page. What we're doing today is we're doing a season preview. We're talking about this season's Gonzaga basketball team. What do you need to know? Who left? Who's new in the program? We're going to really get into specifics of what we expect this rotation to look like, give you all the facts you need to know before the season starts, and really where we're at when we're filming this video. The Zags have played one exhibition game. They did beat Eastern Oregon University at McCarthy Athletic Center, 115-62 this past weekend. They do have one more exhibition game against Lewis and Clark State this upcoming Friday before we see them open the regular season against Dixie State.
Yeah, and that's obviously we're just over a week away, man. Just under a week away, actually. So excited to see it. And that Dixie State game is going to be super important because, of course, we'll get into the key games coming up. But there is a big game happening early in this season, so this team will be tested early.
Yeah, expectations are sky high coming off of a 31-1 season last season. Let's get into a little bit of just an off-season recap, what you've missed since we ended the season in Indianapolis last year. And the first thing we need to talk about isn't something that we want to get into too much on this show because it is going to be a hot button, but it's something that Gonzaga fans and players are going to hear about, especially on the road all season long, and that's the Mark Few situation. For those of you that don't know, Mark Few, who has a place up in Idaho, did have a DUI just about a month or two ago, was pulled over. That has been resolved through the legal system. He did plead guilty as getting community service, and then he will be suspended the first 3 games with Brian Michelson taking over the head coaching duties. And so just be ready, especially in the WCC. As this team travels, you're going to hear about it. It's something that's going to be a narrative this entire season. I will say this close-knit group, I mean, you know, everybody makes mistakes. Mark Few's going to have to pay for those mistakes, just like anyone else, whether he be a public figure or not. But you can tell that this close-knit group in this program is going to be able to move on from that and hopefully have a very successful season. Other off-season notes to really get into: Mike Roth, the athletic director, he's been here during this entire magical Gonzaga run. He does retire from the Gonzaga athletic department. And then another one that we did a video on earlier in the offseason is Tommy Lloyd, really Mark Few's, right-hand man through this entire run, does leave to take over the helm at Arizona. Of course, we wish Tommy nothing but the best. But we did bring back a familiar face to Zagland to kind of fill in those shoes a little bit on the coaching staff. Yeah,
Stephen Gentry obviously comes back, and he'll be a part of this coaching staff this year, which is really nice to have that just familiarity, coming back to the squad. So that's going to be very easy for them to integrate. And we look forward to him being a part of this and obviously just helping continue this run.
The key departures for this team, obviously, Jalen Suggs. You've got a guy like Jalen Suggs who is a top NBA draft pick. We were watching the exhibition game this weekend, and I'm thinking about, could you imagine this team with Jalen Suggs on the floor? It's not a guy that you replace. It's a guy that, as Zeg Nation, we were very lucky to have him for one season in Spokane. He does go number 5 overall in the NBA draft to the Orlando Magic. And Corey Kispert, this is a guy who, we saw him. We'll get into this later on, but Julian Strother is going to have huge shoes to fill. He is a very different player, but Corey Kispert's a guy, he was in this program what felt like for a decade. We got to watch him just progress so much from being a feisty freshman to really one of the most polished players in the NCAA last season, and just a lights out 3-point shooter. He goes number 15 to the Washington Wizards, joins Rui Hachimura in Washington. And Joel Ayayi, I mean, this was a guy who did it all, a Swiss Army knife for this Gonzaga team last year. He ended up signing a two-way deal with the Lakers, was released after Summer League and kind of training camp. He's in Washington as well. So you kind of have like the Washington Zags and like the Memphis Zags going on right now.
Love to see it. You love to see it.
If you're looking for an NBA jersey, those are two teams that might work for you. And then Aaron Cook, who had eligibility left, a guard with some experience. He transfers to Georgia. Love Aaron Cook. I think he played a lot of meaningful minutes for this team last year. You wonder a little bit, it's just an embarrassment of riches in this program that the writing was on the wall a little bit of, as much as I know this coaching staff and the players love Aaron Cook, were there going to be meaningful minutes for him on this team? He moves on to the SEC and goes down to Georgia. What we want to move into is the recruiting class, and it is an exciting one. It's something that we talk about a lot on this channel, and I'll tell you what, you can't talk about this year's recruiting class without talking about the number one overall recruit in this year's class, and that's Chet Holmgren. We got a chance to see him on the court for the first time in that exhibition game, and it's special. I mean, call him a unicorn, call him whatever you want. The guy, you should not be able to do the things that he does at 7 feet tall. Being able to bring the ball all the way up the court. We saw a couple times where he almost crossed up guards. I know they're NIA guys, but still, he's crossing up guys that are 6 feet tall. He can shoot the three. We obviously know about his shot blocking abilities and what he can do around the rim. But this isn't, I think about Jalen Suggs, who was a elite athlete. He's the kind of guy who we haven't really seen come through Gonzaga. Chet Holmgren, I don't know if we've ever seen a guy on a basketball court be able to do the array of things that he does.
No, I would agree with that. He's so unique in his skill set, and obviously he's a former teammate of Jalen Suggs as well. And if I'm going to pull one comparison between those two guys, he has that chip on his shoulder. You think back to that Baylor game, Jalen Suggs was, of course, kind of the one that didn't seem overwhelmed by the moment, aside from his foul trouble when he was on the court. He was very productive. And you watch Chet play this game, Chet's going to be that guy that brings the edge to this team, kind of sets the tone for them. And then, of course, his skill set's going to take over, and we're going to have a ton of highlights to watch from him because he's just so special out in the basketball court.
Other guys who got added to this recruiting class, Hunter Salas, he ended up as a number 20 recruit in 2021. He was ranked as high as 6 at one point by 24/7 Sports. He is a slasher. He is electric. He's going to be able to do, when we watch that exhibition game, he's going to be able to do, in my mind, a lot of those things that we saw from Joel Ayayi. I think he's going to be a phenomenal rebounding guard. I think he's going to do a lot of those things that they may not light up the stat sheet a ton, but we're going to see Hunter bring really this explosiveness to this offense and defense. I think he's going to be a great lockdown defender as well. That if you think about this Gonzaga team over the years, they weren't necessarily known for their athleticism back when they were making the runs in 99 and, through the 2000s, even with, Morrison coming through the program. Amo wasn't really necessarily a stellar, athlete or lateral quickness guy, but Hunter is going to end up being one of the best athletes we've seen in this Gonzaga program. He wins a slam dunk contest at Craziness in the Kennel, and so we will get a few highlight plays, but I think Hunter's a guy who, honestly, it's easy when you're in here with Chet and all these other high-end recruits that he's going to be overlooked, and you got to be careful because this is a guy who is on track to play at a higher level past Gonzaga.
Yeah, definitely. He's obviously got NBA aspirations in the future. I think that's a big part of why he chose Gonzaga, as well as the recent success they've had getting players to that next level. But you talk about right away his defense, his perimeter defense. I mean, we saw him take a charge as well in the exhibition game and really just making it tough for guys to handle the ball out there. This is a 6'5" guard with a 6'10" wingspan. You talk about something we haven't seen at Gonzaga. That right there is it. And he's got elite athleticism as well. We saw his speed in the open court. Of course, you mentioned it early on. This team's going to look to run, and Hunter's going to flourish in that because he will at all times be one of the fastest players on the court. So really look for him to just be a big piece of that backcourt. And the nice thing this year, man, is we have some depth, so he's going to be one of many pieces back there contributing.
The other thing that I saw a lot during that exhibition game that you feel like it's a part of his game, but I feel like this coaching staff has kind of said, hey, we kind of need this in our offense, is that cutting action as well, which Joel Ayayi was so good at. And so I do look for Hunter to take over a little bit of that as well. Another guard in this recruiting class is Nolan Hickman. This is a guy that what I remember about Nolan Hickman, he was a late recruit coming to Gonzaga in terms of his commitment, is they had the Iverson Classic this last season because there was no McDonald's All-American game. It was really the big showcase for these seniors, and everything you kept hearing from scouts and guys who were at the Iverson Classic was that Nolan Hickman was the guy that stood out to everyone. He then commits to Gonzaga, and you kind of wonder, like, how will he fit in? I'll tell you what, this is a guy, a freshman with a very mature game. We saw in the exhibition that he's really running that second unit. Rasheed Bolton, who we'll get to in a minute, is running, he's with the ones right now. We know Andrew Nemhart's going to be really the chef of that offense for the ones, but Nolan Hickman came in and ran the offense with those twos. He's a kid that he has a high basketball IQ, but he can also shoot the three. He's got a great handle, and also look out for Nolan Hickman as being one of those lockdown defenders.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think was overlooked coming into this season, and we saw it right away. Very quick, very good feet out there. He gets his body in a position early. He's not a reaching type of defender. But I'll tell you what, man, one of the things I love about him is just his savvy ball handling. Gonzaga is already super lucky to have one of the best pick-and-roll guards in the country in Andrew Nemhart. But do not overlook Nolan Hickman back there. He is very, very skilled, both in transition, bringing the ball up, and in that pick and roll. One of the things I love about him is he always has his eyes up. He is a pass-first guy, especially when he's bringing that ball up. And when you're on a team like this that can get out and run, and you have scoring options at every position, that's really going to be key. So very good skill set for him. I think he's a little bit underrated just because of the other recruits you see in this class, but he will make some huge plays. If there's a guard on this team that's going to make some Jalen-esque passes that make your jaw drop, I think it's going to be Nolan Hickman this year. I think we're going to see quite a few just highlight dimes out of him.
Little backstory on Hickman. He actually comes from Sammamish, Washington, ended up transferring to a prep school in Utah, committed to Kentucky, and really what you heard was that he went to Utah for his senior year of high school during COVID, kind of got a little bit of homesick, realized, gosh, maybe I don't want to spend the next few years away from home, ends up decommitting from Kentucky. Gonzaga gets lucky. I can tell you what, the Zeg fans, you're going to be very lucky to have this kid as a part of this program. Next guy we want to talk about, also a really local grown kid. That's Caden Perry. This is a kid that committed to Gonzaga a couple years back. He comes out of Battleground, Washington. We didn't know if we'd have Caden this year. He did suffer a back injury at the end of his senior season. So we are, he was in craziness. He played the exhibition. And I'll tell you what, he doesn't look like he missed a step. This is a kid you're going to hear all season long the comparisons to Brandon Clark. And the reason for that is this is a 6'10" guy who is explosive around and above the rim. He will dunk on you. He will block any shot. And really the big thing with Caden is he doesn't play like a freshman. He has that confidence already that you can tell, like, he's going to go up on you and he's not going to let, you come in. When he's playing defense, he's going to try to contest any shot he can. But really the big thing with Caden on this team, because we know, like, the sky's the limit for this kid, right?
Absolutely.
He's going to be a kid that when he leaves this program, we're going to see him grow leaps and bounds. But on this team, what he adds to the depth of that front court is why this team is being considered a national championship contender.
Yeah, you look back to last year, and I think the front court was obviously a little bit of an area of concern as far as depth goes. You know, once Timmey was off the court, we were just trying to keep things, at par down low. And this year we can bring guys like Caden Perry off the bench and still be aggressive down low. I know I already mentioned, kind of Chet bringing that edge to this team, but Caden's another guy who's going to do that. You mentioned it. He wants to dunk on you. We saw it in the exhibition game as well as craziness. Even a guy with Chet's shot blocking ability does not phase Caden down low. He will try to dunk on him. He will try to get up and contest those shots. So, right away I look at his ability to set screens for these guards and then get to the rim. He knows his role, and his role is going to be finishing on people down low and being an efficient scorer, which I think we're going to see him do a good job of.
Obviously, the parts of his game that you're going to see improve as time goes on is his ability to step out, shoot his free throws. I think with Caden, all that's going to come. He's got a high motor. This kid just comes across, he always has, as just a super hard worker. He's going to get there. I think on this team, him being able to just kind of stay in his lane, play his role, just like everyone else. When you have 9, 10, 11 studs, everybody just needs to play their role. And I think as long as he does that, he's going to play some very meaningful minutes for this Gonzaga basketball team. The last new face that we mentioned earlier who comes via the transfer portal is Rasheed Bolton. This is a 6'3" guard, senior transfer from Iowa State, averaged 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. Last season in a game versus Baylor, I should say. On the season, averaged 15, 4, and 3. Here's the thing with Rasheed Bolton is if you didn't watch the exhibition game, he has elite speed and athleticism. I mean, it stood out right away. Again, I know that they were playing Eastern Oregon, okay, and so the athleticism can look a little exaggerated, but just if your eyes have seen, like we saw
speed.
We saw Suggs last year, and it's not that he's more athletic than Suggs, but the quickness, the way he can get up and down the court. The thing that I think Rasheed Bolton's going to do, and I think one of the main reasons, few likes to start seniors, we know that, but I think one of the main reasons you saw Brian Michelson roll him out in the starting 5 is he's going to be that lockdown defender for an on-ball defender. When, they start this season and they're playing Texas, they're playing Alabama, they're playing some elite guards, he's a guy that I believe, and we've seen this really the last 5 years in this Gonzaga program, where Mark Few and this coaching staff like to have a guy that we can put on your number 1 and really dispel them and take them out of the game. Rasheed Bolton, as much as he can do on the offensive end, is going to be that guy on the defensive end for this team.
Yeah, and that's just a huge thing that any guard can bring, right? I mean, a lot of guys can score, but when you can bring that lockdown defense, you're going to find yourself in starting lineups and in pivotal positions in a game. So you mix that with his senior leadership. He has seen all sorts of elite players in his time in college, so he's not going to be a guy that's going to be phased out there on the court. And that's really where we're going to see him, I think, shine early. But you mentioned his speed in the open court. This is a guy that's going to be able to get to the rim. And the Zags are really going to put a lot of teams on their heels early. I think that's going to be one thing we're going to see. And Rasheed's going to be a big part of that. But this team is going to be able to go on these 8-0, 10-0 runs in a flash. And having his speed out there with his leadership and his ability to knock down the three. I mean, this is a guy we saw early in his career shot actually quite a few threes. But coming into this team, I think we're going to see him be a solid three-point shooter as well. So he's got a ton of opportunity in front of him, and I think he's going to take advantage of that in his senior season.
Yeah, we've seen Mark Few over the last few years want to get into more of that full court, three-quarter court press. We saw a lot of that in the first exhibition game, and when you can go as deep as this team can and you have the athleticism that this team does, I do think we'll see a lot of that this season as they want to get out and run. So those are the new faces to the program. That's not even getting into the key returners, and that's what we're going to get into next here on Upper Left Sports. And you can't talk about key returners without talking about Drew Timmey. This is a National Player of the Year favorite. Won the 2021 Karl Malone Award for Best Power Forward. I think you have something to say about his footwork.
Best post footwork in the country. I echoed that.
That's going to end up being put on a T-shirt.
I think it should be at this point. I mean, last year people tried to argue Garza. This year, it's no question he has the best post footwork in the country.
But this is one of those that for this team to win a national championship in college basketball, it's so much about who stays. Can you be a team that's a high-end team that gets some guys to come back? And the fact that Drew Timmey, he tested the NBA draft waters. I will die on this hill that Drew Timmey is going to be a productive NBA player. But he tested the NBA draft waters. You could tell he wanted to come back and he wanted to win a national championship in Spokane. Here's something I'm going to say. Me and you've talked about this off air, but I'm going to say it is he's not going to win National Player of the Year, and that's no knock on Drew Timmey. It's because this team is so talented. He's not going to have the volume that like a Luka Garza had last year. That's what it takes to win National Player of the Year is it takes getting a lot of volume, and he's just not going to have that. That being said, he probably will be one of the most dominant players in college basketball this season. He's a guy that in the WCC, we saw it last year, he just feasts. I mean, he can get any basket he wants to. And here's the deal this season is if you're going in, let's say you're Texas or Texas Tech or Duke, and you're matching up against Gonzaga. Last year, you could say, okay, let's take Timmey away and make these guards shoot it. Well, you want to do that this season, and guess what? You got a 7-foot unicorn in Chet Holmgren that now you have to worry about. Yeah. And so you're not going to be able to see teams really, game plan to take Drew Timmey out of games. So I think we're going to see a lot of those 20-10, maybe 7 or 8 blocks like we saw last year. And the part of his game that I love that I don't think it's talked about enough is for a big guy, he sure does know how to pass the rock.
He really does, man. We saw it in the exhibition game. I mean, he had just a beautiful bounce pass through the lane. And it's so impressive when you have a scorer of his ability to still focus on that passing. And he knows the team that he's on. He knows he has scorers around him. So we will see plenty of games where Timmey has a mismatch and he is going to go to work. But I think we're going to see a lot of games where he just defers to other guys, whether it's the hot hand or just a good matchup. And that takes a lot of kind of senior leadership and just basketball IQ to be able to do that, to not force the ball down low. But he is just such a special player, man. Like you said, national player, player of the year favorite. Whether he wins it, we'll see. But we know what we're getting in Drew Timmey. He is as advertised, and look forward to another big year from him.
He spent the offseason really grinding, in the gym, working on his athleticism, his lateral quickness. It's something that it jumped off the screen for me in that exhibition game. So I think that's going to catch a lot of people off guard as well. Next guy we're going to talk about is Andrew Nemhart. This is a guy who will be running this offense with the ones. Last year he kind of played second fiddle to Jalen Suggs in that guard rotation. He was a starter, played super meaningful minutes for this team, did struggle a little bit in that national championship game. Here's the thing with Andrew Nemhart. This is a kid who he doesn't have to be, a top scorer on this team, and he knows that, and he's willing to, but he can. This is a kid that can get buckets. He can shoot the three. He did a very nice job last season for this team shooting that three in transition, can also get to the basket at will. And so it's one of those things that, fuse guards in this system, going back really to I think about Perk a little bit here, is that Perk was a super capable scorer, but he didn't have to be. And so I think what you're going to see a lot in Andrew Nemhart this season is him facilitating the offense and getting this offense to really take some good looks.
Definitely. And, right away, we already mentioned it, he's one of the best pick and roll, if not the best pick and roll guards in the country. Yep. So what you're getting is passing. I mentioned this last year about Andrew Nemhart, and it has not changed. I also think he is what you call a mid-range maestro out there. He gets to that elbow and has such a high IQ, whether it is a pass off that elbow, or what we saw a lot last year was just one of the best looking step backs that we've seen come through. His step back jumper is very smooth. And, this offseason as well, we know he put in a lot of work on that three ball. So I think we're going to see him really step up his scoring, even though he's got all these options around him. I mean, he had 17 points against Creighton in the Sweet 16 last year, so we know he's capable, and he's going to be just a do-it-all guard that really gets everyone else going out there.
You talk about the depth of this team, and we haven't even mentioned a guy who's been, really a 2-year starter on this team. That's Anton Watson. He started games as a freshman. This is a kid coming out of high school that was projected to be a one-and-done and be, just out of the lottery, and he's had some injuries, at Gonzaga, had some shoulder issues. We saw in the exhibition game, is not starting on this team, which I don't think says anything about Anton as much as it does about how good this team is. The fact that if you're a coach and you can have Anton Watson coming off of your bench, you got to feel pretty good about your chances as you get into March. But this is a kid, we know he's a team player. We know that he really, his what he does on the defensive end for this team, rebounding, getting into passing lanes, he's going to start so many of these transition baskets that Mark Few loves to get for this team. And so it'll be very easy with the flashiness that we're going to see from some plays, whether it be Chet or, with Hunter, to forget about a guy like Anton Watson. He's the glue guy for me this year. He's the guy that if Anton Watson can play his best version of basketball, he's really going to be key for this team cutting down the nets in April if they want to.
Yeah, you got to have one of those guys on a championship team. You just have to. And last year we saw him be one of the most efficient scorers in the country. He was obviously very good around the rim. But one of the things that popped off the screen for me, we watched, craziness and the exhibition game in particular. That exhibition game early on, he gets the ball up top. He aggressively goes to the basket. The handle looked good. He looked quicker than last year. And we also saw him a little bit later catch the ball up on top and take a rhythm three-pointer that he was able to make out there. And that was something that we saw him do in high school. We saw him with the ability to shoot. Didn't see as much the last couple years. I think a lot of it was due to just the shoulder issue and the confidence he had out there. But I think this offseason being healthy was big for him. He looks confident and really look for him to kind of take that step that we've all been expecting.
He was a guy in that national championship when Gonzaga gets, absolutely just socked in the mouth by Baylor, that he did not back down. I mean, He was a guy that continued to bring it, and I think that's going to be a key role, as he is one of the veteran leaders on this team, is to bring a little bit of that edge that we've talked about that really I think this whole program's looking for after what happened last season. The next guy is a guy that I knew going into this offseason, I really expected to kind of step up and be the guy for this team, which may sound crazy. That's Julian Strawther. This is a guy who, he was a part of that tricky trio with Dom and himself and then Jalen. And, what we saw last year at the end of the season is I thought Julian really started to hit his stride. He was a guy that I personally was hoping would crack that rotation as they went through the NCAA tournament. I think in that Baylor game, we saw a lack of depth. We saw a lack of few willing to play more guys that really came back to bite them. And I believe Julian was ready for those minutes. He said it perfectly after the exhibition game. He's like, I played behind All-Americans last year. He was behind Corey Kispert. He talked about how much he learned from Corey Kispert. And I'll tell you what, the reins are off of Julian Strawther. If you're looking for a just cold-blooded scorer who, I remember back when Snacks was here, we're talking about Zach Norvell, that he just wanted to go out and get buckets. I mean, he never saw a shot he didn't like, and it's not that he took bad shots. Julian Strawther has that Adam Morrison killer mentality that you put the ball in my hands, like, I'm going to be that guy. And I think it's really easy when you have 9, 10, 4, 5-star recruits on a team to get a little bit too unselfish. And I think it's going to be important for them to have, like, hey, late in the game, you need a bucket. Who's that guy? Julian Strawther, he had 18 points in the first half of that exhibition game. I mean, this is a guy who I expect on this team, as crazy as it may sound to a lot of Zeg fans. I think you're gonna catch up over the next month. He's going to be, I believe, the primary scorer in this offense.
That would be a sight to see, man. I think he's fully capable of that. You mentioned how many points he had in the exhibition game, but what I loved, and again you mentioned this, was his confidence. It's easy to come out and be timid in that situation, knowing you're replacing Corey Kispert, knowing how stacked the team is around you. But we saw him do it all three levels too. I mean, this is a guy, he transition threes, catch and shoot threes, getting to the rim at will. And, also, if you didn't watch Craziness, you may have missed this. He was not happy about losing the dunk competition to Hunter Salas. So he's going to add in some elite athleticism to this as well. And his confidence right away to come out and do what he's doing is going to be huge, especially in these big early games. This is a guy who's going to take a massive leap and be a huge key piece of this offense.
When he came into Gonzaga, he was known more as kind of a slasher. I don't think any of us really anticipated him being able to shoot the rock as well as he does. And so
work ethic.
As we look at this Gonzaga team, one of the big questions is, where's the three ball going to come from? I think he's going to be one of those guys who's going to have to shoot at a high clip. Another one of those guys who does start the year injured is Dom Harris. This is a kid that we do expect for him to hopefully be back as we get into December, January, somewhere in that time frame. We don't have an exact timetable for his return. But here's the deal. He's a guy who can come in when he's healthy, even if it's in conference play or whenever we get him back this season. He's a guy that can shoot the rock. Talk about that elite athleticism. He's got an injury that's going to be a little bit hard to come back from to start. But I think that Dom's one of those guys with the embarrassment of riches that if they can get him healthy and on track, he's going to be able to do a few of those things that this team needs in terms of shooting the three, in terms of being a lockdown defender. And so hopefully we do see Dom Harris back soon enough for this team.
Absolutely.
The last guy is Ben Gregg. This is a kid that it's such an interesting situation because he was supposed to be playing high school ball during March Madness last year, ended up moving early to Spokane to be a part of that national championship team. And so he's not technically like a freshman anymore.
Eligibility-wise.
I'm going to consider him a part of this freshman class. But this is a kid that, you know, with this team, it's going to be interesting because he's going to play meaningful minutes. Ben Gregg can do a lot of things very well. You know, elite athleticism, that sort of thing's never going to be his forte. But this is a kid that this coaching staff loves Ben Gregg, and this is a kid that I believe is going to be a Zag favorite by the time we get 3-4 years into his career. And I think it's a long-term vision with him. He's not going to play a ton of minutes on this team. I think he will play meaningful minutes, but have a little bit of patience with him. Not that he's not ready, but he's going to have his time to shine.
He will, definitely. We saw him come in early in the exhibition game, and he just did the right things. You saw him playing defense right away, hitting his mid-range jumpers. He did even extend that range out to the three-point line off the pick and pop. So very talented player. I think in a lot of years where this team isn't as deep, we see him playing a lot more. But he will play some valuable minutes this year, and I think he'll take advantage of those as well.
So that's the roster. Next thing we want to get into is the key games for this Gonzaga Bulldog team. And the first one, I mean, they've got the Dixie State game. That'll be a good little tune-up. But I'll tell you what, the fact that Texas comes to Spokane on November 13th, this is my national championship prediction is Texas and Gonzaga. Chris Baird came from Texas Tech, goes to Texas. They remind me so much of this Baylor team from last year. They brought in a ton of transfers, but some really good transfers. I think it's good that Gonzaga is getting them early because as they click, watch for this Texas team to just get better and better and better. But I think this is a team I expect to be, in the Final Four down in New Orleans as we get into March. So that's November 13th. November 23rd is really the game that everyone's had circled on their calendar all offseason. We heard it was going to get scheduled. It didn't. It finally did. That's the rematch between Gonzaga and UCLA. And so we know that's going to be a ton of fun down in Vegas. It's the same week as this next game versus number 9 Duke. And so I know a lot of Zag fans are headed down to Vegas for Thanksgiving week. Yeah. That's going to be a blast. I mean,
absolutely. That's
Johnny Juzang watching this UCLA team who gave Gonzaga obviously fits in the NCAA tournament, and then turning around for the Coach K farewell tour down in Vegas. T-Mobile Arena is going to be rocking, and so this team's going to have a lot of early tests. And then one game we have scheduled on our calendar, December 4th, the battle in Seattle versus Alabama. We'll be at that one. We get to go watch a little bit of Kraken hockey the night before, and then
it's a good weekend. Go
check out Climate Pledge Arena 2 nights in a row. That'll be fun versus Alabama. And then really the final non-conference test is December 18th versus Texas Tech. I think we were both surprised looking that they're not ranked yet. I think they will be by the time that game does happen.
Definitely.
And then as we get closer into WCC play, we'll talk a lot about key WCC games in different videos. I think the WCC is very improved. I think it's really hard to actually pick out what teams are going to be the top of the WCC because I think top to bottom it's going to be stronger than it has in a long time. And so really that's what we've got for the season preview. You know, I think takeaways from what we've seen so far with this team and just kind of some of our observations are that the speed is evident with this team, you know, top to bottom. This is
say the least,
a very quick roster. Starting lineup that we saw in that exhibition game. We saw Nemhart running the show, Bolton really at the 2, obviously Chet and Timmey down low, and then Julian Strother playing the 3. I do expect that to be the starting lineup moving forward. I'll tell you what, having 2 bigs, having 2 guys who, in Chet and Timmey, it's wild to see. Watching that high-low action, watching them bring the ball up court is just an embarrassment of riches. And I think we're going to see this coaching staff really go with a very deep rotation, something we haven't seen maybe ever with this Gonzaga basketball program that I think is a long time coming when you have so many good players. You do need to go more than 8 deep, and so I hope that Fewey and this team do give a long leash to this bench. But give me your, really your key takeaways from what we've seen and what you expect from this team this year.
Speed and athleticism, man. That's what I see as key takeaways right away. I do agree with you. It's kind of going to come down to who can be those 3-point shooters out there, because as much as this team gets to the rim, you do have to be able to stretch defenses out. So I think this team, from what we've seen early, fully deserving of this #1 ranking, one of the deepest squads in the country, and I'm looking forward to this new season.
Well, that's all we've got for our Gonzaga basketball season preview show. Let us know down in the comments really what you're looking forward to see this season, players you think are going to play a big role as this team, and some of those key games that you're excited about. And I'll tell you what, it's super fun. We'll be doing a Texas preview next week. Look out for those. We'll be doing game previews during non-conference play, but it just feels so good to be back talking Gonzaga basketball here on Upper Left Sports.